I'm going to go ahead and get started here with some of our housekeeping and welcoming information, and then we'll move on to the agenda. Today is Thursday, May 28th, and this is a Chelmsford Cpac meeting. Just briefly, Chelmsford Cpac is a special education parent advisory council, and it is a parent-led organization that provides support to families and children with special needs. And we work with the district to provide advisories on special education programming and services. This is a Zoom meeting that is being recorded. Chelmsford Telemedia is recording it. So thank you to Pete for helping us set this up, and it will be posted at a later date on their YouTube channel. So it will be available for viewing at a later time if you're unable to stay for the whole meeting. As we are on a virtual meeting, if you're not familiar with this, we are going to ask if you are not presenting that you mute your mic and turn off your camera. If you just want to do a double check and make sure that that is set. We have asked that if anyone has public input that they email it to chelmsfordcpac@gmail.com ahead of time. However, if you have additional public input that you'd like us to share during that part of the meeting, there is a chat function available on the bottom of your screen. You should be able to hover and a little chat bubble will pop up, and that message will be sent privately to the host of the meeting, and we will read that during public input. That would be the same if there are any questions that come up during the meeting. You can send those into the chat function as well. We're just trying to reduce the back and forth that can come up during busy meetings, and want to make sure that we're respecting the privacy of the participants that are here. So looking briefly at our agenda, we have 4 things on the agenda this evening, and there is one amendment to be made. We're going to add one more item here. We're going to be looking at the community awards, board elections. We will have an update from the family support group, and adding in an additional item here, we have Amy Reese and Amy Matson from Student Services Office, who will provide information related to remote learning and extended school year, and we will end with public input. So thank you for coming. I'm going to go ahead and start roll call, and then we'll move on. My name is Allison Barnes. I'm one of the co-chairs for Cpac. We also have in attendance Kristen Erickson, co-chair for Cpac, Lori McCarran, secretary, V.S. Sangrizi, the treasurer, Amy Reese, and Amy Matson from Student Services, and later, Jen Bellissimo will be joining Lori for the family support group update. So that sends us, we are starting with community awards. Oh, so I will introduce one more person. We have Amy Domo, who is our workshop coordinator, who has also volunteered to help with the community awards. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Amy, and she can kind of give us an update of what's going on with that. And yeah, so
awesome.
I think I did it. I did. Great.
Okay, awesome. It wouldn't let me, so.
Oh, yeah.
So just to give, I don't know what kind of background folks have on last year, and I apologize, I have to use my phone, so the only people I can see are Allie and myself, so hi everybody. But last year, Lori and myself worked on an initiative. We created a Google form, got responses from the community, and it was, you know, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but there were, you know, we were able to deal with it certainly, but there were lots and lots of responses, which was great, from the community. So what we were able, there were so many, in fact, we were able to kind of organize them into school staff, so kind of direct line folks, administrators within the public school system, and also community members. So we got quite a few nominations for bus drivers and mail carriers and folks of that nature. So what we decided to do was to recognize everybody, given that it was the first year of it, as opposed to doing, we kind of batted around, should we have some kind of special award, if you will, for kind of one person. But we decided kind of everybody needed or deserved kind of that recognition. So Lori worked really hard on working with Amy Reese and probably Amy Matson as well. The SPED office printed out some special, or the print shop or whoever printed out some special certificates. And then I know Allie, Kristen, myself, Lori, I think did as well, took them around to different schools. We kind of divided up the district and we delivered those to those folks within the district. And then we also presented the names at a school committee meeting. I believe that was in June, I think, of last year. So we would like to continue this. I think given our current circumstances, certainly we are kind of way behind on the planning, and that I take responsibility for, certainly given events in my own life. But you know, I'm willing to help, and I know that there were some other people who wanted to help on this initiative. What I'm thinking is if we could roll out another kind of Google form and get responses from the community. What I'd really like to do is to roll this out in the fall, if it's possible, the recognition piece anyway, at the kind of back to school kind of event. Now, if we're not back at school, then that might kind of change kind of what we want to do. But I know, I think anyway, I shouldn't say no, but I think Chelmsford does a, you know, kind of all together something or other, maybe at the high school, the PAC or something. I know some districts do that. This year that, again, might not be a thing that folks do just for the crowd kind of piece, but you know, if that's virtual, you know, we could participate in that and read some names as they relate to the district. So you know, I think that's kind of where we are for now. You know, I certainly, if we were not in this circumstance, my idea would be to fundraise and get some donations from the community and do more of a like a reception-y kind of thing. You know, nothing with rubber chicken or anything, but you know, just maybe some light desserts, you know, that kind of thing, to recognize people. I know that I have a friend who works in a district closer out to Framingham, and they give out roses to their to the people that are nominated. So we could see about getting, you know, some donations for that, you know, whether they be monetary from community members or from florists and things like that. So I just think it's hard, given we're in a place where we really don't know what's gonna happen. You know, we're hoping that we're back in school, you know, but that might not come to fruition. So I guess I would pose the question to Amy and Amy if they felt like that's something. Does the district do something kind of all together for staff at the beginning of the year? And do you think it would be possible for us to kind of take a piece of that?
I would just that we do. We traditionally have a first day. We gather for a very short period of time in the morning. It's very jam-packed, where we usually have a keynote speaker, the superintendent, the chairman of the school committee that speaks. And then it's quickly out and everyone goes to their schools to kind of, because it's the only day we have to kind of do stuff before. So that wouldn't be my decision to see if there's room in that. I do know that that particular day is pretty jam-packed. So, whether if it's something that, is going to be short and quick, that would kind of be up to the superintendent and Dr. Hirsch, the assistant superintendent, who kind of helps coordinate that whole day. So I think we would have to kind of see about that. Again, I don't know. We don't have the plans. I mean, that's the plan and has been the plan, but, we don't know the final components of what the beginning of the school year is going to look like. And, I don't know that, if changes will be made to what that first day will look like, instead of gathering the entire district, which would be an awful lot of people in one location. We may do something different, but that hasn't been determined.
I'm wondering if, as some of you know, I work for a district, not in Chelmsford, but another one. And sometimes what they do at the beginning of that is they have a slideshow. And sometimes what they do is they recognize staff who've been there for, certain 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, whatever. Is that something that Chelmsford does? Could we kind of jump in on that kind of beginning piece and have something that's kind of rolling with people's names?
They do a slideshow with pictures that is
okay.
It's kind of just running as people are coming in. That's
okay.
It's put together, by a variety of different people across the district with shots.
Sure.
Like I said, that would be something that we'd have to have a further conversation about, for what the plan of that day entails and if there's time for that. But I'm not saying it's not possible. I just can't.
Sure. No, I get it. We could also entertain doing a video, a very quick video clip. Something again, super quick.
Or I had an alternate thought. The schools all have TVs in their lobbies. What if we did a slideshow and then it was something that could be playing during those first day or two when the teachers are in, and it would be just kind of ongoing there rather than taking up more time of their day where it's already, like you said, kind of jam-packed on that first day where everybody's meeting together. That way, they can catch it when they walk by, but it could also, like if we wanted to do it, say with music and post it on social media or on our website, it could be accessed in other places too.
I love that idea.
We also have the Chelmsford, communications director who kind of does a lot of the management of the social media. So we could always get something like that, and she could get that posted on the Chelmsford page.
Who is that person, Amy?
Her name is Jody. Her last name is escaping me how she pronounces it. She's based out of the central office, but
so Viez and I actually had a idea that we could do something this year, possibly for June, where we just we could send out, and Viez, I don't see you, but we could take the lead on this as far as for June, as if a Connect Ed went out to just get people to send in nominees, and we could read the name of the person that was nominated by the parent virtually and make it part of a virtual meeting that could be recorded as recognition for this year, so we don't have to wait till fall, and then read one sentence about why they were nominated. That was just a thought that we had to make sure that because we know teachers have really gone above and beyond this year particularly, just to get that recognition out there in June. We could get the school committee to maybe have a meeting that would highlight a recognition, community recognition, and we could read those names or put them up on a screen. That's also an idea that we wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, I think it's good to brainstorm, a bunch of ideas, and then we can kind of work to kind of see what is feasible. Make whether you want to do it now, in June, or wait till the beginning of the year, or
if we wait until next year, I think there's going to be too much going on. That's just my input. especially with CPAC kind of changing a little bit. Viaz,
Yeah,
do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I'm ready to compile the list. I'm ready to. We can always put it up on our website or Facebook, and also announce it at the school committee meeting.
my only concern would be, given the time, I mean, we're already at almost the beginning of June, and knowing last year how long that took and when we started that, I mean, I'm pretty sure we set out, I can look at, I have all the form and such, but I think we started that in, was it May, even April, disseminating that to the community. And then we extended the deadline and things like that. So in order to pull this off by the end of the year, we're talking, this has to be literally rolled out, next week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if folks think they can do that, that's great. I personally can't commit to that. But.
So we do have one parent commenting that they feel sooner rather than later would be beneficial. The teachers are working hard now. And I just want to add on to that. I think if we did something in the fall, it would be, as Amy said, something at the very beginning of the school year. So it wouldn't be like significantly delayed into the year. We're looking at maybe like the 3rd or 4th week of August. And with the timeline that we have here, I think it would likely be realistic to have some sort of form go out in the next couple of weeks where we're getting feedback. Like we already have what we used last year. So it's really just revising that and then deciding what to do afterwards. So maybe, all right, before I go on, another parent is chiming in that some students are transitioning to different districts as well. So we want to make sure that their teachers are recognized while the students are still in the district. So maybe we could look at something where we're getting the form out sometime in the next week or so, since it's something that's already made, and then work on it over the summer, early summer, and then reiterate again, like in the fall, something like where we're doing a slideshow while the teachers are doing their prep days or something like that. That way it's kind of that reminder. It's like, we know that you worked hard. We're glad that you're back here, but it's also not so delayed that it's separated from the current school year. Does that make sense?
I think that's a great way to do it, Allie. I think, too, knowing from last year and the time, we kept kind of extending it and we kept getting responses. So I think actually having a long time for responses isn't necessarily a bad idea. And I think we could do a push now. We could do a push, in early August to mid-August when people start to think about school again. Then we could kind of keep it rolling, so to speak. And I love your idea about the doing it in the lobby. I wonder if we could have it run too during curriculum nights, if that's going to be a thing next year as well, and have that running in the lobby. You wouldn't necessarily be able to hear it, but visually certainly that could be something that's running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea as well. Yeah, and it looks like through chat we're getting some notes of agreement that kind of sending out the initial request for feedback in the next week or so, and then kind of putting it together over the summer, and then re-releasing once those teachers are back at school in the fall. Looks like a good plan where we're kind of addressing it now, where we're getting that recognition started, and then making sure we have that boost at the beginning of the school year too.
Sounds good. And I can, given that I don't have to wouldn't necessarily have to tally the data, so to speak. Right now, I'm more than I can put it together because, like you said, Ellie, I'm pretty sure in forms you just can replicate and I can change the dates and all that. So I can get that to you at some point this weekend or the beginning of next week, definitely. And then if you don't mind helping with the dissemination of that, or Amy's, I can send it to you if that's easier. I don't recall I think Lori handled that piece last year.
I had a lot of help actually from Linda Tonini, and a few other parents were the ones to, so special ed printed up the certificates that we kind of looked over and decided on, and printed it, color photo, and then it was actually the volunteers. I think we had about 6 or 7 parent volunteers that gave them out last year.
Yeah, no, I'm just sorry. I'm just talking about the dissemination of the form, like the emails that disseminate the form itself.
I don't remember how that actually went out. I tried to get a copy of it after the fact because I think other districts were looking to do something similar, and I couldn't go back and find it. So I'm not sure how the form went out to districts in the community. Like, I'm not sure how it went out. Was it like a Google Doc?
A form. So like a survey almost. And then there were certain required fields and things like that. I know that I have it because I created it. So that'll be easy cheesy for me to replicate. I'm pretty sure that there's a duplicate kind of button, and it automatically kind of repopulates it. I just have to go and change the dates and the explanation kind of thing. Like I said, I just don't recall how Amy, I think we sent it to you and you helped with that maybe?
I'd have to look back. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It went out via Connect Ed. A lot of times.
I think so.
Wasn't
Yeah.
Debbie Phillips sending out the Connect Ed messages for a while for you, Allie, when you would have something?
Yeah, she was helping with that. I'm actually not sure if they're going out right now. We did a request for this meeting and it didn't go out. So we'd have to check to see who the appropriate person is for that.
And moving forward, my office can do them too. It's just, yeah, I just have to kind of go in and log in and remember I just haven't done it in a while. Or I can set it up for one of the admins in my office to do the Connect Ed messages. We can definitely do that. Moving forward, and if it can go out via Connect Ed, we can set that up to send it out.
Okay. So when it's done, I'll send it to you and to Allie and the Cpac board, and to you, Amy, then, if that sounds good.
Yeah, sure. And I'll if you don't have Laurie and Via's information, then I'll connect you guys all together. That way it's everybody's in agreement with how it's going out and everybody's on board, same page.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So just to make it clear, for next school year, I'm not quite sure how involved I'm going to be with this. If it was something that is going to be done this June, I could help with. If it's something that's going to be rolled out in August, I'm not quite sure I'd be able to help with it. So any inquiries regarding this would definitely have to go to the Cpac email and the district email.
Sure. Thank you, Laurie. Yeah, I think we're looking at a couple of phases: getting the request out, working on it, and possibly starting to present some of them over the summer, and then doing an additional presentation or making it accessible in additional places once the school year begins. So we would we can work out those details outside of this meeting, I think, if that's okay with everyone. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Any other comments or questions regarding community awards? Nope. All right. So we're moving on to board elections. VS, when you got it set up here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull up the bylaws so that we can go over the process of how elections typically work. typically, that would be happening at tonight's meeting. However, we would have had to set up nominations and invited people to volunteer for those positions. So we're working on a bit of a delay for that.
Can I share my screen?
Yes, please. All right, great, thank you. So if we could take a quick look at officers, if we could roll down here. So currently standing, CPAC has 3 officers, the chairperson or people, secretary, and treasurer. Elections are held annually, with positions running from June to June. We are expecting that that schedule is going to be shifted for this year. We are not going to be able to hold an election by June and still allow time for nominations. But we will be looking for feedback via email, via the chat now, from members and other persons in the community on how to approach that. Just briefly, the duties of the officers here. The chairpersons set the agenda and facilitate the meeting, are representatives of CPAC at public functions, help to manage the activities of the organization, and our regular communication with administration and school committee. Additionally, making sure that new board members receive the open meeting law materials, help to manage communications, which is shared with the secretary, and of course the position can be shared with a co-chair. The secretary records minutes, keeps the records, helps to maintain outside correspondence and post meetings. And then we currently have listed a treasurer. However, as previously discussed, we were looking at possible amendments for this position, because we don't manage any money right now. However, we do have a lot of information that is online, whether it be our website or social media. So there is a need for someone to kind of take a technology position. And that is something that I would recommend the future board to review and possibly amend that position to have a different title and responsibilities. So if we go down a bit more, there's a section that specifically says how election procedures are typically held. There it is right there. So elections are held by majority vote of those in attendance at a general meeting. That usually takes place in May, and is preceded by nominations. And then if a position is vacant, then that can be filled immediately. And that again would be a vote at a general meeting. So what we would be looking at here is we're not having general meetings right now, but we would want to ensure, one, that any person's interested in volunteering to be nominated or to nominate, who had interest in nominating someone else, had that opportunity, and that any members in our community who are eligible to vote, that would be parents or guardians who have a child receiving special education services in the district, would have that opportunity to do so. So what we would be looking for now is some feedback from the community, from any of the board members or administrators that are here currently on how to proceed. Because we know there's at least, I know for myself, I will not have a child in the district next year, so I will be unable to continue my position. As Lori stated previously, she's unsure of what her involvement will be coming up in the fall. So we're expecting some changes to be happening on the board, and we'll be looking for more parents to come into some sort of position to keep Cpac up and running and supporting the community. So anyone here have any specific ideas, feedback on how we can proceed? Laurie,
I do have a few notes.
Yeah.
Just from our current bylaws that, give me a second. I have too many computers open right now. So Viaz, if you could pull up board elections, Article 6. Yep. Bylaws, election procedures. Okay, yep. And then maybe a motion to suspend elections, if we could, and I want to wait until we get input from the chat and input from the district admins, but maybe based off of that input that we get tonight, to suspend elections and make a motion to do that if we cannot do elections. I think we have to make it official that we can't do that due to COVID-19 and being remote. I have a note on Article 7, subcommittee interim team.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Just while we're at that point, we have 4 parents who are in the participant section.
Okay.
If you are a parent and you are here and you are interested in making a motion on the subject of delaying or postponing elections, could you please post that in the chat box? You should be able to open the chat box by hovering near the bottom of your screen, and there's a little speech bubble. All right, I've had 1 parent motion to postpone. Is there a second? And a second. Okay, so so I guess that opens it up for discussion, and we can do a vote with who's here. Did you have a suggestion for a timeline on postponing, or we can leave it open?
Well, so my suggestion was going to then go to Article 7, subcommittee and interim team, which might, I think we have to talk a little bit about this with the members, the possibility of, let me see here. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading the screen. Let me see if I can just grab the hard copy.
Nope, we've enlarged it, so maybe take another look, Laurie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm multitasking. I apologize.
No worries.
So if we do suspend, we may have to put elections off until next year, and we don't know what next year is going to look like. I think it's important that there's some kind of board or interim board in place to keep Cpac going. If we do not have any parents that are willing to step up to be nominated and then elected in, then we have to look at an interim position. If we do have parents that are interested, I would highly suggest that they get in touch with the Cpac between now and June. If not, I think we have to look at the interim part of the bylaws.
Okay, so when you're saying June, let's put a date on that, because June is in 3 days. So we typically meet the 4th Thursday of the month. So let me just pull up calendar here real quick.
I just want to also note, I'm not able to type and do this at the same time, so the minutes may not be recorded exactly of what we're talking about because I'm.
Yeah, we're recording the whole meeting, no worries.
Okay.
So that would put us at June 25th. So I would say we would probably need to plan a meeting for June 25th to as part of the motion to postpone elections. We should plan a meeting for June 25th to bring this up again. And in the meantime, seek input from our members and feedback either via email or by attending that meeting in the chat box as one part. Two, Cpac can talk to school administrators. I know Amy Reese had in the past set up an interim team, so the district has experience doing that, and I would assume by the nod of the head that that would be something that a procedure that could be taken up again.
If an interim team were to be put in place, Amy Reese and Donna Newcomb have experience with this, so it's something that that I think could be handled by our CPAC liaison and by the special ed administrator.
Yeah,
I was going to add too. I mean, is it a possibility that parents could potentially volunteer to be part of an interim team if they're not ready to commit for the entire year to be maybe elected, if things are going to be postponed and we don't know whether or not the elections can take place in September or January later in the year? You know, even besides having to kind of look, I mean, last time we had to put an interim team in, it was a little bit different. It was kind of, I was new to the district. The district really didn't have a CPAC. It was in non-existence for a long, long time, except for some online stuff. So, I mean, we do have a lot of members that have been regularly attending. You know, some may be hesitant to commit to, you know, taking on a role permanently, but maybe just to help bridge this transition time and you know, where two major board members, you know, aren't going to have students in the district or, you know, in special ed. So that's always another option. If a parent maybe is thinking about, I could step up and help in the next handful of months, or even to try it out to see if then maybe they want to run for a permanent position. You know, we also kind of talked at the last meeting a little bit about, you know, being able to streamline and pare down some of the commitments and the time that, you know, it's been an awful lot of time that the board members have put in, you know, to get things up and running. And, you know, it's been amazing, you know, what you've accomplished. But, you know, I also think now that things are kind of established, you know, we could kind of look at some in-person meetings, some virtual meetings, you know, looking at what would be the, you know, a couple of events that would like to be able to do throughout the year instead of having, you know, something every other week that people can't commit to.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I think it's great that we open up, if anybody wants to be on the interim team, it should be open to parents, any parents that are any interested parties.
Something to think about. Allie,
And that,
sorry, thank you. Sorry, I was just saying. I think that's probably a well thought out and realistic approach. As everyone's stressed right now, there's probably not going to be people stepping up, as you said, as for permanent volunteer positions. However, some of our active members who are regularly attending meetings are familiar kind of with how we typically run things. They might be comfortable stepping in for a certain number of months and then overseeing an election in the fall.
And there'd be support from the district. I mean, you know, to kind of help walk anyone through anything. And I'm sure, you know, they to reach out for some questions and guidance from you both.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
do want to make sure that our members know that our minutes, our current bylaws are on the CPAC webpage. They're also hard copies at the Chelmsford Public Library, and anybody can get hard copies of the past meetings in a binder there that will be updated up until this current meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. That's an excellent resource to remind families that we have. And yes, like Amy said, we're not, for my family, we're not moving. I just won't have any children in the district. So any parents that were thinking about volunteering, even for a short period of time, you will not go unsupported. There are many in district and in our nearby districts who are extremely helpful and knowledgeable, who would be able to kind of help get things going in whatever fashion or whatever direction CPAC continues to go on. So
I have one more note for the bylaws. Yes, if you could move to Article 11, and it's bylaws amendment. Okay. Yep. So just a reminder that the bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 vote of those in attendance at a business meeting, which this is considered a business meeting. It says bylaws shall be reviewed at least every 3 years. So they can be reviewed and amended at any time with a 2/3 vote. So if anything does, if an interim board and then an elected board comes together, that is also something I just wanted to highlight.
excellent. Thank you, Laurie. All right. So then what we would be looking at is coming together again for a virtual meeting on Thursday, June 25th, 2020. And that would be to discuss election procedures and the possibility of how an interim board would function for a fall election to help cover the positions that are becoming vacant. Right. So I think we could probably, I think what might be easiest for me is if you are a parent in the district, if you either vote yes, no, or abstain, if you type that in the chat box, it will be easy for me to count that up. So if you're a parent in the district, if you could take a moment to submit your vote, that would be great. Sorry, I think I just someone
And just to be clear, we are voting on. Oh, sorry, Allie, I think your mic is off.
Sorry, I thought you were reading something. Voting on holding a virtual meeting on Thursday, June 25th, to discuss elections for the new board, which could involve an interim positions to cover the vacant positions with an election in the fall.
So election procedures.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Last call for any additional votes of parents that are in attendance. That would include board members.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right, so Laurie, that was a unanimous for yes. All right, does anyone have any other questions or items to bring up related to board elections? All right. So,
I think I have a Kristen keeps getting booted from the Zoom. I think she's trying to get back on.
okay.
I just got a message.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know. I don't think there's anything that we can do on our end to help with that. I'm sorry, Kristen. Okay. So, Laurie and Jen, that's going to bring us to Family Support Group update. And yes, I think they had something they wanted to share.
Yeah, I just need a minute to pull it up.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Is Jen on?
Yeah, she's here. Let me make sure she's can unmute and all of that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, you should be able to do it yourself now.
So I think Viez is going to pull up the Family Support Group newsletter with our topics. Once that's pulled up,
There we go.
there we go. So Jen, do you want to start and I'll type, or do you want me to start?
So we've had a couple of support group meetings over the last, I think in the last month, and just a couple of topics that have come up. Transition meetings are a concern, specifically for those students who are transitioning to a new school district. And there's just been some concerns and some questions with regards to who's responsible, especially if there are already summer services in place. So we're not talking about requests for new summer services, but those that are already in place. And when is the transition date? And then, and specifically, we were looking at Neshoba Tech and Innovation as two potential locations of students. So that's the first thing. And then there was questions about progress reports, especially related, to the pandemic. How are those being, evaluated and assessed? How are those goals being measured? That type of stuff. And then finally, Laurie, maybe you can speak more to the outside evaluation. I don't know if you have more notes on that one.
So all right. So the note that I have from our families regard medical providers such as Children's Hospital bringing that data to the table, and how those outside evaluations are going to be looked at from the district's perspective, and how they're going to be weighed. And then I also have, sorry, give me one moment. So a quote for a parent. It seems like, from my experience, Chelmsford has taken a more asynchronous approach to remote learning, which is not beneficial to some students with special needs who need to see their teachers, therapists, and some peers, even if it is through the computer. If this remote learning plan continues in the fall, will there be more synchronous learning for our kids? Therapists and teachers don't have much data on the students at this time, since only activities were sent. So how will progress reports be given? How will compensatory services be determined, since many special needs kids are regressing? This may be covered, but if there's any update with remote learning versus in-person learning for extended school year, even at the fall. And then these kids, especially special needs, need their therapies and social interaction. Wondering if there are any updates from DESE/CDC, etc.
So that's what we have.
So great. And I just want to say thank you for continuing to support our parents. If you're not familiar, the Chelmsford Family Support Group is a group that you can join if you're on Facebook. It looks like they've provided a link there in the middle of their image. But if you put in the search function Chelmsford Family Support Group, it should come up as an option. And you would be able to make a request to join. And I believe there are some qualifying questions that they look at.
Allie, I think the
yeah.
link is actually for CPAC.
Oh.
I believe
Okay,
that's the
great.
CPAC link that's on the parent support group.
Okay. And well, either if you follow that link to CPAC, we do have it shared in that group as well. But you should be able to find it there. And if you are a parent in the district, I would recommend joining it because there's some great candid conversations and support that happens there. And it is a great resource for our community. So thank you, Laurie and Jen, for sharing that with CPAC. I think we have Amy Reese and, oh, I'm sorry. Did anyone have any questions? I didn't have anything pop up in the chat, but just in case, were there any questions for Family Support Group before we move on?
I do want to say one more thing with the support group. We
Sure.
we not only take topics of interest and concern, we also just share stories with each other and laugh a lot about the craziness of what our lives are. And it's just a great group to join if you just need to vent. It's not all about, you know, issues that are going on. It's actually just a place for parents to kind of
Connect.
Yeah.
connect.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Great. All right. And no additional questions. So thank you again, guys. We have Amy Reese and Amy Matson that we're sticking in here. I just want to add, we've only had one public input, and it was actually the same information that Lori read there at the end, asking about how progress reports are going to be able to be filled out, lacking data to support, and the questions about remote learning and extended school year and into the fall. So
I'm sorry, Allie, can you just say that?
it was the only public input that we had was the same that you just read, from the same parent. So I just wanted to bring that to light before Amy kind of take the stage here and share their information kind of on those topics by chance.
Yeah, are we ready?
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we wanted to take a little bit of time to just kind of update, especially on extended school year was the topic. I can speak a little bit about the progress report question. I think that wasn't one that I had was aware of, but
yep, it just came in. Sorry.
Extended school year, we are looking at doing that, continuing in the remote learning format. We were hoping that there may be a chance to do a hybrid or some sort of in-person as well. Last Friday when we had our call with the Russell Johnston, who's the state DESE head of special education for the state, it's looking, you know, we're starting remote learning in that format. He talked a little bit about the potential, or we could hope, that maybe by towards the end of the summer, there being some opportunity for some, you know, small group or one-to-one type tutoring or therapy type thing in person. I don't know how likely that will be. We're kind of planning for both. The logistics really are, though, that we're going to be looking at remote learning. It'll stick to the same kind of weeks for the most part that have been identified of what extended school year was going to be. It's just that the format and the scheduling is going to be a bit different, much like the school year has been, where it hasn't, there's not a way to implement the entire IEP, but to kind of work on those skills from the remote learning and those skills from the IEP that were identified as areas of regression prior to this, school closure, and those topics will be, reviewed virtually. We do recognize it's not the most ideal format for some students. We have students who are thriving with it. We have other students who are really struggling with it. But it's kind of the situation that we're all facing at this time. So that's kind of where we're at. We're working on how it may look different, what we're doing for staffing. We've had a lot of the teachers kind of reach out and say, if it's remaining remote learning, I don't typically work in extended school year, but I wouldn't mind being the one to support my students that do have extended school year services. So what we're hoping and trying and planning is to have it as seamless as possible for those students that do participate in extended school year services, and have somebody hopefully familiar to them to work with them virtually, because we recognize the fact that it can be a challenge if a lot of times when it's in person, they come in and they have a different teacher for the extended school year part. It's a little bit easier to transition and assimilate to somebody new. So we're hoping to have more familiar faces to the students so that we can kind of provide that. We'll be kind of reaching out shortly to parents of students who have extended school year to kind of get input in their thought process. We've had some reach out and say, if it's remote, we may take a break this summer and not participate. And that's perfectly okay. We completely understand that. I mean, I think as we've gotten through the last 3.5 months, a lot of people are overwhelmed. And in those cases, we can work to kind of provide activities and stuff to the families that their students can kind of still work on some activities to help prevent regression and focus and target skills. And that's fine. And yet we will plan for to continue in a remote learning plan format. Again, not everything as identified in the IEP can happen in this remote learning session or format. So that's the plan moving forward at this time. Any questions about extended school year maybe before I jump to talk about progress reports a little bit? And you can
I haven't seen anything come through chat, no.
You can always go back to it if somebody thinks of it, or if you think of it later and you want to email us, that's fine too. We've had parents reach out, ask questions, etc., and it's it makes
Sure. We did actually have one question about ESY. Would it be more activity-based, so being similar to what we have now with remote learning, or would it be more likely that it would be one-to-one Zoom meetings, something where there's FaceTime happening?
It wouldn't be necessarily one-to-one, but small group. It could be. I envision it being. It's similar to what we're kind of doing now. So in other words, as Desi has outlined, there's two components to it. There's activities that are provided to families with support around those activities and instruction. So there will be an instruction component as it exists now. Looks like it could vary depending on the age of the student. It could vary depending on the disability type or program that the student's in. So most of that instruction has not been one-to-one, as they don't have the one-to-one during the school year either, but either in small groups, or it could be, it wouldn't be whole class sizes because it's not a gen ed component, but it could be the special educator with a couple of, a handful of students that they're assigned. They might do a morning meeting for, the group that they are working with. They may have some targeted individual activities. They may work with a couple of students at a time. We may have some paraprofessionals supporting what the teacher's doing as well. So it's going to look pretty similar to what we're doing now in remote learning, only the focus is different. The focus for extended school year is on prevention, preventing regression, maintaining previously learned skills. So there won't be instruction done on new IEP goals or new skills or new curriculum material, but it will be really targeting activities and lessons that will reinforce and give that repetitive advantage, to the students to be able to practice those skills so that they don't lose them. if that answers that.
Great, thank you. There are no more questions right now.
As far as progress reports, now this is a hot topic, I think, even amongst directors to DESE and amongst the discussion with special educators, with us in the district and our department meetings as such, and it's going to be tricky. However, there's still what I envision now. The third term was pretty much ending around the time we went out, so those progress reports were done. But really, this fourth quarter, or depending on if it was a trimester for the age level, they have pretty much been through this remote learning period of time. So we have teachers assessing kids and getting ideas of where they are on as best that they can in the mode of instruction that we have. There's a lot more communication with families as well to kind of get some input there as to problem solving and seeing what's working well and what's not, to kind of get a sense of the skills. Each progress report goal is probably going to have like a statement on it talking about this time of school closure, remote learning, and that it hasn't been a typical instruction period. And that kind of will be the precursor, so to speak, intro to the progress report, and then what has been focused on for either through that activities and support, and what has been worked on, and what has been new instruction in areas of new instruction. So, they're going to be written to the best of the ability that they can based on the circumstances everybody's in.
Oops. There's Kristen again. All right, so great. Thank you for sharing all of that information. And I haven't, we have one more question that just popped up. Will you be asking parents for data since they are the ones working with the children?
I think we had this discussion.
Yeah, we had that
before.
the last meeting, yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember this came up, I think when we met, it was in April. And I think we were pretty kind of candid that, the expectation is not that parents are now taking data and sort of becoming the data collectors on their kids to then relay the information so then the teachers can report on it. I mean, that has never been the expectation. That's not the expectation from the department. That's not the expectation from any districts. That being said, I think to Amy's point, there has been probably more communication with families than when we are face-to-face. And so I think families certainly bring information regarding, whatever it is, participation, engagement, what's working, what isn't, that sort of thing, that I think we probably could see a teacher folding into a progress note. But that's going to be different information than expecting a parent to, share, my child did this 10 times. I mean, that's not what we're looking for. And I will say, just to agree with Amy, this is coming up a lot. I think we've even seen just out there some kind of examples of some of that language that you might see in progress notes, just to sort of paint the picture of what's happening right now. We've looked at some of it we like, some of it we don't. So I think we're still sort of in the process of, funneling that through. That would, again, be sort of that perhaps like introductory couple of statements that you might see before the teacher would, get into the more specific information about your child.
I was just going to add too, keeping in mind, we report on the IEP goals as often as students are reported in the gen ed situation. What we do know too is what gen ed is going to look like for their end of the year report cards is going to be different than they typically have. We're looking at this credit, no credit, pass fail type components of things. So I think you're going to see the gen ed classroom report card reporting look a lot different too, given the situation that's going on, as would transfer into the special education progress reporting as well.
I think one of the reasons why this keeps coming up, and I do remember that we talked about this maybe at a planning meeting back in April with CPAC, because I do think some of the info that parents are getting for children with special needs is that they are the data keepers. And I'm not sure what that actually means, but they are the ones who are sitting there kind of learning how their child learns, and they're hoping to bring that to the IEP table. When we first brought it up with you, the information that I was getting from the Federation and from CPACs was that parents were kind of being the data keeper. So it might keep coming up. I think that's something that is possibly going to be brought up even next year. So I think that's why you keep hearing.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying, yeah, as far as the reasoning goes, I think, using the term maybe data, there's information that parents have and can share. And they are communicating on a daily basis or weekly basis with the teachers, in a lot of ways. And I think it really depends on the level. Yeah, families of younger kids who aren't as independent need a lot of support. But then you do have middle school and high school students who are doing some of this work more independently without needing to have that level of support. So I think it varies depending on the student as far as that goes, but I think getting that information is important, whether it's for progress reporting to kind of fold it in, as Amy said, or when teams reconvene when school's back in session. The focus isn't necessarily, that's why it's a team process when you're talking IEP meetings. Everybody comes, whether we're closed and doing remote learning or whether we're in session learning. There's always components that parents have that they can share that teachers don't have, with whether it's homework, whether it's projects, whether it's writing, to kind of share in that IEP time. And that's not going to change. It's just that, parents, a lot is put on parents at this point in time, and to kind of add that added stress to say you need to be writing down and tracking all of this information. There are assessments that are being done. There are components of checking and seeing how kids are doing. It's different and maybe not as frequent as it was happening when school's in session, but that is still occurring. So I think it's compiling, when we look at IEP goals, really what a student can do as that goal is written on a consistent basis to meet it, and whether that goal will need more time to be targeted or whether a goal has been reached or not.
So I just want to clarify. I don't think this is coming from a place where parents feel stressed to do this and to be the data keepers. I think this is actually coming from they want to add more to the team. And maybe I'm wrong from interpreting some of the feedback that I'm getting from parents, but I think it's not putting the pressure on the parents to bring that. I think it's actually what they want to bring and how they want to be part of the team and be heard, so that it factors into the ed plan going forward.
Allie?
Yeah, I just want to read one feedback from a parent and then add on. So a parent is responding that depending on the age of the child, the teachers or therapists may not be viewing the child at all. So there are skills that only the parent can comment on. I think that ties into what Amy was just saying, is that the feedback from the parents is a vital piece right now, while it might not be specific diagnostic data where you are keeping track. Are you prompting, partially prompting, verbally prompting, for example. But I will say our family has had one virtual meeting during this time. And if you remember back to CPAC's, our last presentation where we provided a lot of support and information for parents, kind of the main piece that we kind of honed in on is that communication right now is number one. And part of that is because the teachers aren't seeing what's going on. And I will say the anecdotal information that I was able to provide, that the teacher was able to look at what was actually being done, their interactions with my child, and then kind of compile all of those things together. And it was used in making the decisions for what would happen next. So I would say maybe, and I think I probably said this last time, is that data, I think for parents is not the word that we want to be using here. We maybe should be considering maybe input or feedback might be a better way of kind of like categorizing it in your mind, so that you're not stressing out. I fully understand the importance of data and being able to look at the numbers, but we're unfortunately not in a situation where we can really have that reliably and with validity right now. So I think we wouldn't want to be making decisions on data and numbers that maybe it isn't as reliable as it would be in our typical situation, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, Allie. And I think, that's a part of it that I think everybody kind of has to keep in mind here when we come back either to the table at an IEP meeting or you're reading a progress report, is that, what we do know is students and our children learn differently in different environments too. So what a student may be able to demonstrate returning to school or for the teacher may look different than what they can do in the home setting. Like, as we know, homework can be, either done easily or it can be a nightmare for a lot of families, depending on, what the issues are around that. So, we got to keep that in mind. So in the sense that we don't want to just take everything from this stressful environment of this, new learning mode and kind of totally revamp, say, to say what somebody can and can't do. And I think honestly, we're not going to have a total sense of really what is true regression or what is true. You just need to get back into the practice of learning skills in a school environment. And they're going to regain those quickly until we're back in school for a period of time where we can kind of have a better sense of re-dipping those diagnostic, assessments to kind of, those informal assessments too as well. And it's going to involve conversations, it's going to involve conversations. And I think, one of the parent support group things was, or somebody brought up something about compensatory services. That whole discussion can't really happen until we're back. And that's been pretty clear by the department and by, teams, until we're back to when we're back to what we kind of consider, in-person learning, so to speak, for that. That doesn't mean IEP meetings can't happen. That doesn't mean changes can't happen. That doesn't mean other things can't happen, but that conversation about, because, and I really don't even like the word compensatory, because Jesse defined it and Russell Johnson defined that is the failure of somebody to do something. And this whole situation has not been a failure on anyone's part, on families' parts, on schools' parts, on teachers' parts, administrators' parts. It's been the unfortunate situation of the world that we're in. So the way Russell Johnson phrased it, which I liked, was the fact that some teams are going to have to reconvene and consider whether the student, because of the period of time and looking at their disability and looking at how much programming they have and what their specialized program looks like, may need some additional services or additional components added because of the change. And he talked about it as additional versus compensatory.
I also joined in some of Russell Johnston's meetings, and I think that was one thing when this first started to happen. One of the concerns was brought up about compensatory, and the feedback that I'm getting from families is not seeing any failure or anything there. I do think it's something that's going to have to be looked at next year, but I don't see that being a huge issue as far as where Chelmsford is at and how Russell was talking about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Okay. I was just going to add, keep in mind, all students, special education, general ed, ELL, no matter what their learning situation is, all kids aren't learning in the same capacity that they typically would be in making the gains or the progress that they typically would be if they were 6 hours a day in school in person. So I think that's, you know, something to kind of keep in mind. And I think once we do return to somewhat of a regular in-person school, we will have to really consider on some teams, you know, for students, are there additional services that are needed because of the school closure?
So we have two follow-up questions, and they're both kind of related to procedure. The first, if parents have elected to hold a virtual IEP meeting prior to the end of the year, can decisions be made about summer services, recognizing that any other changes would not be implemented until school resumes?
IEP meetings that are occurring or happening, that IEP is being written not for the remote learning time, but it's being written for when we return to school, whenever that time frame is that we're back in the school session. So in other words, we know that we have remote learning plans that are being implemented now that are kind of taking critical, you know, goals and services that need to be focused on during this time. When we write a new IEP, it's going to include everything that's been in the other IEP based on, you know, when we return and can start implementing the full IEP again. I think I spoke last meeting about ESY, extended school year criteria, that the criteria for that remains the same. And Russell Johnson's been very clear about that. It's not to consider this time of school closure, but it's to consider the data that's been collected when school's been in session about regressing or losing, not being able to maintain skills. So, you know, there's a number of students that, you know, they learn a new skill. Maybe it's a new phonetic skill if they're in a specialized reading program, but their disability is such that once they gain that skill and learn it in the methodology they need, they're going to maintain and keep that skill. They're not going to regress or lose that skill. But we do have students who do regress based on the criteria, the regulations significantly, or take significant time to regain skills that have been identified for needing the extended school year. And that's the format and that's the criteria we're still using for this summer's extended school year, if that helps.
So if I'm understanding, students who are identified as needing extended school year will continue to receive that under the remote learning plan, not under their IEP.
It's probably already identified in their IEP, if that makes sense. It's already in as part of their IEP. Those are the students that we've already, you know, we start tracking and
we did a lot of this work prior to the closure. You know, having teachers identify the students, and really we start with all students that they whether they're sure, you know, that they have, they know they have the data to support. And then there are always a handful of students who, you know, the teacher's like, I want to, you know, I want to get a little bit more information, but, you know, I'm going to add this student. So we start pretty early, like back in late winter, kind of looking to gather that information. So actually when school closed, we already had a pretty kind of hefty list of students by level and what the recommendations were going to be. So I think, though, just want to be clear, though, if I was maybe understanding what the sort of the other part of the question was, that we're not in a position because the criteria for ESY has not changed. We're not in a position where we're going to be proposing ESY for a student because of the school closure. So ESY is still based on the data supporting regression and skills, not because school's been closed. So I think that I can see where that would be a confusion, you know, parents sort of thinking, well, maybe if my student, you know, had summer services, you know, it would help. And I think we've gotten some very clear information that, you know, the criteria for ESY is not any different.
Kristen, did you have something you were going to say?
No, I'm sorry. I was saying goodnight to my daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then just a clarifying question there. So if there is an ample amount of data from March and February, the team should be having a discussion and changing that IEP as needed? Like,
For
for example,
ESY.
they had the data, but you weren't able to meet and
Yeah, I
change
mean,
for
we've
ESY for this year.
right. I mean, I've had, a few teachers reach out and say, we weren't able to hold a meeting on so and so, and if we had been able to meet, I was proposing ESY for this student. And then again, we were sort of going back. Yes, that student had already been included in your recommendations because you already had the data to support it. So yeah, there may be students for whom, proposing whether it's an amendment or whatever it is, to include ESY. I just think it has to be made clear, though, it's not because teachers are saying, well, geez, now that we're out of school, I think all these kids should have it. It's really kids who have already been, been on that list.
I would add to that, those meetings that Amy just spoke about, the handful of cases, almost every single one of them already had a meeting scheduled. There was a meeting scheduled in April, or they had an early May meeting that was already scheduled on the books and it got canceled. So the team had already planned to meet to discuss ESY as an option based on the data that had come in through January, through February, and there was a meeting already in the books ready to go. It wasn't something that after the March closure that was added because of the closure.
One more additional question on this topic. If you had a meeting regarding a child qualifying for ESY, but you disagree, what would be the next steps?
Well, I mean, the step really is to respond to that IEP. So when you go to respond to that IEP, you always, if it's just an ESY component that, extended school year that you don't agree with, you can check that, where you can partially accept and then list what it is you're not agreeing to or what you're disagreeing with, which would be the extended school year. That sometimes happens and families do that, whether they think it should be added or whether they think it's on there. We typically tell them if it's recommended, they don't agree to send them, or they have other plans usually in the summer. They don't necessarily have to reject it that it's there, because families still have it's the only thing that's kind of interesting in the IEP. They still have the option of saying, I'm not sending my child, even if it's the team has recommended it. We always put it in the IEP if the team recommends it, but then, we always reach out to families and say, are you going to participate this year or not? And sometimes that changes year to year depending on their family situation. Some people travel. We have kids that travel every single year to other countries, and they don't usually participate because that's the time of year the family can go for 3 weeks or 4 weeks at a time to visit family. So, that's I don't want to say a common occurrence, but it occurs in a lot of cases. And it's, it's okay for a parent to opt to not have them participate in it. We usually provide activities to keep them engaged a little bit, to send home, but they can reject that part for whatever they don't agree with.
And I guess adding on to that, a parent has a right to request a meeting at any time as well. So if you would like, is that an option during this time? Because I know procedural safeguards you can, but I know we're kind of in a flux time right now.
Well, what I would say is I would try to reach out and talk to the teacher and try to talk about what the concerns are, what the reason behind needing it to have the team reconvene. I will say we're holding virtual meetings, and we've scheduled them. They're pretty booked. The focus has been on students whose IEPs have, would typically meet from March to June, or maybe even have expired because they expired in early April or something. Those are the meetings to rewrite IEPs that we automatically reached out to families to see if they wanted to schedule it or did they want to wait till the fall, because we gave families the option. There's a couple of other components for reasons that meetings have had to take place. So we've had those scheduled as well. We've done a few, a number of transition meetings are being scheduled for students transitioning levels. to have that conversation. And those are briefer meetings, but to kind of help bridge, we typically would have had that if we were in session. But yeah, I mean, anyone on the team can reconvene a team at any time. I would just, if it's just solely for extended school year and the thought process is because of the school closure, that's not the criteria, for extended school year.
Right. I think this parent was specifically if they had disagreed with a previous decision.
Oh, and checked it on the IEP. I will say there is a little bit of a delay with the mail. I think we're getting it much more regularly now, but there was a lot of families saying, well, I did return it and we didn't have it in the office. I was going in twice a week. But then as all of a sudden we had 2 big mail bins show up at the office that I think were held at the post office. So we did get caught up a lot on those IEPs coming in. I would say if a parent partially rejected an IEP and checked they wanted a meeting, I would follow up with a communication to the special ed teacher or the team chair, because they may not have seen that actual box on the IEP if the team chair hasn't been in the office and the teacher hasn't. They get it, they get the notes and it gets turned over in the management system. But just for the sake of communication, I would reach out and make sure.
Great. So one more question about extended school year. This is related to transitioning to a different district. So not a student who would be out of district, but say a student who is starting somewhere new, like at Neshoba or Innovations. When is the official transition date? Who provides ESY services in that case?
I'm gonna run in. I'm gonna just go off video for a second and run in the house. The bugs are coming out and it's getting dark. Hold on.
Sure.
Typically, I can start to answer that. So typically, if a student is transitioning to a new program, like a Neshoba, but does have an extended school year, typically it would still be our responsibility to provide that summer programming, and that transition would officially happen in the fall.
Great, thank you. So I'm just getting some thank yous. You're welcome to everybody that I was able to help share your questions. If there are any more questions, whether for administration or just general public input, please enter that into the chat now. Alternately, if you would prefer to contact Cpac directly, our email is Chelmsford Cpac, which is SEPAC @gmail.com. You're welcome to send us questions or comments at any time. Or if you're looking for resources, we can help you find that as well. Additionally, Amy and Amy have offered many times and have reiterated if you have questions either for them or you're not sure who you need to send it to, you can email them or call them at any time. Even if they aren't in the office, they are able to access their voicemail.
Yep.
So please don't hesitate to reach out to them. And I just want to reiterate again, the communication that you have with your child's teachers and their therapists and service providers that they have is a vital part of what is going on right now. I kind of, to get a little personal here for a second, I kind of felt funny walking the walk after doing the talk and emailing my son's teacher 3 or 4 times a week and letting her know what wasn't going so well. And I felt really bad telling her everything that was going on and the things that were going well too. But to be honest, I needed help with what wasn't working. But it made it so that we were able to figure out something that did work. And we were able to reach a point where my child could be successful in our day-to-day, what our goals were for that day. I'll put it that way. So I just urge you to keep those lines of communication open, honest, and realistic. I think everyone is doing their best right now in what they can provide for each other and for our children.
Yeah.
So, great. So, if I haven't had any other questions come in the last minute here while I was filling some time and sharing. So with that, it is 8:31, and I am going.
Before you close the meeting, I just want to make sure I give a huge congratulations to the 2020 class. I feel really bad, and for the fourth graders that are moving up to middle school, and then the middle schoolers that are moving up to the high school. I think they should get a huge shout out for going through COVID-19, and I just think it's worth a mention to those kids that, you know, we feel for you, we're here, and we think such a tough time, but they're handling it really well. I just wanted to make sure that we made a note that that we're thinking of those transitional kids that are moving on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had one person asking if there was going to be any additional feedback from what the family support group raised as issues. I think specifically about outside medical reports. And I right now there's no information about remote learning or in the fall, or if children will be able to attend in person or have to work at home. But I don't have any more information about using outside medical reports, so I'm not sure.
I don't know what the specific question is.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think they want follow-up from that, which is something I don't think we can talk about at this point. I think we just have to, I think Cpac is going to have to follow up with the district in planning meetings, and then how we address it, and then if it keeps coming up as a topic.
Okay.
I was just going to say, for outside evaluations, it's the same process that's always been in place. That, you know, if the parent shares it with the district, we will set up a meeting within 10 days, and the district has to consider, or the team has to consider the outside evaluation, and whether, you know, any changes, whether it's accommodations, you know, any type of services or things that get changed in the IEP, the team needs to consider that outside evaluation, and the regulations are pretty clear about consider. It's not, I think a big piece to keep in mind is medical model versus educational eligibility. So, you know, in a medical model, they have very different criteria for things than it does for the school districts, where we're looking at how it is to access education. So sometimes those can be differences when families may think they're not listening, or they're not listening to the, you know, the doctor or the medical provider who recommended. And I'm going to be really something simple, like a bunch of say PT, and somebody may need PT for medical reasons, but may not need it to access the school building. And that's a very basic example, but it can get a little bit more confusing when you get into other areas. But the team meets, we consider it. The team talks about it, but they don't have to implement anything from an outside evaluation.
So is this something that we can maybe address, keep on the table for the future, especially during COVID-19? There might be a considerable amount of outside evaluations that the parents want to bring to the IEP table for consideration. Can we just keep that as like maybe an ongoing topic for the Cpac to have with the district?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, they can share those evaluations at any time, even though we're closed. I mean, you can still share it. We can still schedule a meeting to consider it. But, you know, I also think the outside evaluators are not doing as many, they're not able to do evaluations at this point in time. So, you know, I'm guessing it's from something that was already completed. And then, because sometimes there's a lag in getting the report from the evaluator.
I do think they're doing something with online. I don't know too much about it, but I have heard parents are getting the tele health services and getting evals. I don't know enough about it to speak on it right now, but I do know that's something that has been considered for outside evaluations.
I mean, yeah, and that would be something the team would have to consider. I mean, the validity of doing certain evaluations virtually would be a concern or something for the team to consider.
Yeah. And then one additional question, looking towards next year, if remote learning has to continue, it's a hypothetical. Will you consider more synchronous learning? So teachers and therapists and students working together online at the same time.
I mean, that is happening. I mean, that is happening depending on the age, the level. There's direct lessons that are occurring in whole group classrooms and Google Classrooms. They're also doing video lessons as well, because not every family and every student can access at the time the teacher's on. So it is happening. The only place that it's a recorded video for lessons, for instruction, that isn't live at all is at the preschool. And that's just because, you know, they're using a different format. They are doing instruction and lessons, and they are connecting with the parents and the families on a regular basis to get that. But to put 15 3-year-olds on a computer for like a morning meeting isn't the mode of instruction that makes the most sense.
And then one follow-up note saying, possibly for the younger students, one-on-one should be something that is considered as needed.
Yeah, and again, we're looking at what the IEP requires and calls for, and taking what the student typically has in the IEP and prioritizing what's there in the remote learning component of things, where, you know, if it's small group, then it's still small group, or if it's, you know, depending on what it is, if it's not one-to-one, you know, the ability and the capacity to provide every student one-to-one, we just don't have the staffing, you know, to kind of look at that when that's not, I mean, we do that for students who have in their IEP that's how they have to learn. Something is one-to-one, and there are students who have certain aspects of instruction that's one-to-one, and then that's, you know, considered, but the majority of the students don't have one-to-one, and then it's small group or a whole group or a combination of learning activities that make up it, but it's based from the IEP.
Okay, so, but if a parent is having concerns, they should reach out to their team and start that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we are all hoping that we are back in person in some capacity in the fall, you know, whatever that looks like, but yeah, I think we just can't say it enough that if you have concerns, if you feel like something isn't working, or you feel like something really is working, you know, you just to be sharing it. And it's really the same thing if we're face to face, right? I mean, if your student is one that the IEP meeting isn't until the late spring, you know, it's not going to behoove anybody if you come to the meeting at that point and say, well, this hasn't worked all year, you know. So I think it's always keeping those lines of communication, and especially now more than ever.
Great. Great. And I will say, if you aren't sure who to contact, on the Facebook group for Cpac, there is the list that Amy provided earlier this year at one of our in-person meetings, and has many of the people in the district and where they normally work. Or you can just reach out to Amy and they'll get it headed in the right direction.
Yeah, you could do that, or I know that another way to find that sheet is in one of Dr. Lang's first, or the one, I think it was the one where I did the memo a few weeks in. I also, or one of them, he embedded the link of the contact information. So it's in one of his earlier weekly updates, I think, as well, if that's easier for families to access, or just email Amy or I, and we will forward it on.
Definitely.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So thanks again, Amy and Amy, for coming in, and Laurie and Jen for coming in for Family Support Group. And as always, VS and Kristen, and to Pete at Chelmsford Telemedia. As a reminder, this meeting was recorded and will be posted at a later time if you would like to share it or rewatch any of the portions. It is 8:41, and I am calling the meeting to an end. Thank you. Good night, everyone.